So hello, everybody. Welcome to the Long Beach Public Library, my Long Beach Memories program. This local history program was an idea I had back when COVID, of course, first started, and we all said that we had to stay home. And to come up with an idea how to give something back to the public when it was in a very, very dark time for a lot of people being shut into their houses. And doing the history of Long Beach was like something that I always wanted to do. So that's how I had gotten my idea. And of course, my brother and all my family were very big on Long Beach history, and being a part of being here for so long, you just become part of the woodwork. So again, welcome. And today is part 2 of the Long Beach celebrities. It also includes, of course, people who live on the Barrier Island. So it's not just limited to Long Beach. There are some Lido people and a little bit, maybe even Atlantic Beach. And also we did last week, which was a great idea, is to have the Long Beach High School Wall of Fame. And we didn't finish that. So we're going to probably just start off by ending with the last part of the Wall of Fame, because we didn't finish it last week, or is it last month? I'm sorry, last month. So let's go to that. We got off on the letter K. So we're up to Hanna Kamanov. She was the trustee and president of the Long Beach Board of Education till 73. She was the first woman to be elected to the Board of Supervisors for the County of Nassau. She was supervisory to the whole Board of Supervisors from 74 to 85. She, of course, was a very, 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 very conscious person about donation of monies and funding the actual Kamanov Center, which is was part next door to the Long Beach Hospital, which is now South Nassau. That rehab facility is named after the Kamanovs because they actually gave their monies to keep the place. They gave lots and lots of their monies, because when she served time and she took her salary and she donated her salary to the care for the geriatric care of those people in that facility. So I found that amazing. She was a resident here for over 50 years and a very loving woman. Her daughter is not on the Wall of Fame, but I have to talk about her since it is her daughter. And she's my next person. Her name is Ruth Underwood Kamanov. If you know anything about Frank Zappa, she was the percussionist for Zappa. She was a trained musician. She graduated Long Beach High School in '62. She played xylophone, marimba, the vibraphone. She played harp. She played synthesizers. She played piano. She was on part of the Mother of Invention for Zappa. She's a classically trained musician, and she studied at Juilliard. So this is Hanna Kamanov's daughter. Wall of Famer, Long Beach High School, 1956. He was born in Long Beach, Mr. Ed Lauder. He, of course, passed away in 13. But as you could see, I had not enough room to put down all his films and all of the places that he was involved in and all the parts he played over his time. From television appearances, 4 decades of appearances on your most fun television programs. He had a basketball scholarship. He was varsity in high school, baseball, basketball, and everything. So, and I remember him from TV actually. So Mr. Lauder, you see on the right is his actually Long Beach High School picture. This gentleman, Dr. Michael Middleman, graduated high school in 1971. He was also born in Long Beach. He became an admiral, and he has a doctorate from Southern College of Optometry. He was the first aerospace optometrist. He worked in Okinawa, Japan. He was in combat surgery, naval medical services, and he won many, many, many awards. He's got the Legion of Merit Medal. He's got the Navy and Marine Corps medals. He's got Navy and Marine Corps achievement medals. This gentleman has done many, many wonderful things. I liked his quote, so I put it on our screen. The reason I believe I could do whatever I do is because of the memorable experience I've had in Long Beach. So he is a Long Beach person, and his Long Beach High School yearbook picture is at the top right. Class of 71. This Wall of Famer, James Mcmullin, passed away in 2019. He was class of 1954. He originally went to school, he went to college, and he studied architecture at the University of Kansas. He went to visit a friend out in Hollywood, and he had a playwright meeting and was given a screen test. And let me tell you, his career started from that point in 1962. Universal Pictures gave him a 7-year contract, and also his filmography could not fit on the page. On the right, of course, is his 1954 Long Beach High School yearbook picture. This gentleman, if you've lived here a long, long time, I don't remember him personally, but I've heard stories about him. He was one of the original directors of the Long Beach Recreation Center. His name is Yale Joel Newman. He passed away in 2008. Funny though, I tried to find a photograph of him and I couldn't find one. So I started to go on this search to find a picture of him. So I actually contacted his 2 sons. They're both physicians, retired. And I found them by an obituary, because when he passed away in 2008, they published an obituary in the Sun Sentinel. And I have to read this to you because it was an amazing, amazing piece that was written by his son's wife. He gave a lot of time to the Long Beach kids. And not only was he a director of recreation here, but he also ran a leadership program in the recreation part in the high school. So I want to read this to you because this gentleman had an amazing, amazing life. But this one little part of his obit just struck me. Yale was proud to have had President Roosevelt write a recommending letter for him as a commissioned officer in the United States Navy. He had the privilege of speaking while the president was living at Hyde Park on the Roosevelt estate. He was teaching high school there. During the Second World War, he was on an aircraft, the Ticonderoga, I'm probably saying this incorrectly, into the Pacific. As a young lieutenant, Yale averted disaster. He correctly realized that the ship was about to be put on the wrong course. And with his calculations, he determined the secret codes must not have been correct, and they were directed at midnight. He went to his admiral and he woke him up. The admiral looked over to him and he said, "Are you sure, son?" And Yale answered as his body was shaking, to which he'd say, "Yes, sir." And later in the voyage, thinking of the moldy K rations that once had been eaten on a darkened ship, Yale took a few seconds to gobble down that last piece of pie, and he went to call to his when the station sounded. And he alone and the dining officers survived that first hit from a kamikaze hit. So during the war, he survived a kamikaze attack on the ship he was on. And he finished school and he became a leader for our kids in Long Beach at the recreation center. This just touched me. I can't tell you enough that I didn't know the gentleman, but I just could not get over how much that he did in his lifetime. Dr. Oberman. He was the superintendent of schools. He was also an adjunct professor at C.W. Post College. He was a teacher and principal at East School, and he was on the board of directors at the Long Beach Medical Center. I remember Dr. Oberman. He was a very, very fine, fine man, and he has place on the Wall of Fame at Long Beach High School. Now, these young fellas, I went to school with Leo and Al Palacio. They both graduated in 1982. They're brothers. And I think his brother also is Luis. He graduated a little bit after in 84. They were all Nassau County and New York State champion wrestlers. Luis Palacio's son, Dylan, whom is on your right bottom corner, graduated Long Beach High School in 2012. He also first Long Beach wrestler to earn a Triple Crown. This is called wrestling running in your blood, running in your family. And these young men I remember going to school with. They are on the Wall of Fame for Long Beach High School. Melvin Pollock was born in Long Beach. He graduated Long Beach High School in 1959. He's a lieutenant colonel of the United States Air Force. He actually was in North Vietnam when his planes were shot down, and he was a prisoner of war for 2,068 days he spent in captivity. His release and homecoming was March 4th, 1973. He was awarded for actions in the Vietnam War. He has a Silver Star, and he served during the U.S. Air Force from 64 to 84, and he was a POW from 67 to 70.
Service time.
Yep, he did amazing stuff. So thank you, Mr. Pollock, for your service and for being a Long Beach person, and from graduating our school and being a good person and taking care of us. Thank you. Michael Stephen Portnoy, graduate of Long Beach High School, 1985. He was born in Long Beach. He was a songwriter, drummer, vocalist. Again, I cannot fit his stuff on the screen. There was not enough room, so it's very, very tiny. So I put it in very, very tiny print, but I wanted you to see his accolade of his compositions. I'm not familiar with his music because I'm a classical person, but he has sold millions and has toured the entire world. He is on the Wall of Fame.
Wow.
This person is a very dear friend of mine. She grew up in Lido Beach, Helene Heins. She was class of 1965, Long Beach High School. She became a phys ed teacher, and she played, and she was all out sports in school. She played badminton, soccer, volleyball, basketball, softball, tumbling. She ran 27 marathons from Boston to Philadelphia to Los Angeles. Helene Heins, I met her going to an MS class because she used to teach water aerobics for people with multiple sclerosis. Miss Heins has multiple sclerosis. So when she became diagnosed, she didn't give up. She kept going forward. So when she wanted to run a marathon and no longer being able to run, she rode. And she's a hand cyclist. And you could see her in action at the top left and the bottom. That's her book. She was third in the world in hand cycling. She won a second place in her marathon. She is also a cancer survivor. Helene Heins, I can't tell you that I admire her not giving up, because it's very hard to overcome sometimes these obstacles that we're faced with, but you just can't sit there and say it's okay. No, you have to keep going, and I have to give her that. And she taught us in aerobics in the water, and she taught disabled boxing as well. These two people I put together because they were husband and wife. I have Audrey Gray Remo, Long Beach High School, 1937 graduate. She was an accomplished young woman. She was rolling bandages during World War II. She taught school here for 35 years. She volunteered at the hospitals, at the soup kitchen, at the Historical Society, at Hadassah, and she was senior of the year for Nassau County. Her husband, Lenny Remo, I remember him being principal in the junior school. He was a teacher, principal, lieutenant of the United States Army from 43 to 46. Very, 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 very fine people. I did find her yearbook picture. She was graduating in 1937, and her picture is up at the right. I just had to figure out what her name was because I only know her as Mrs. Remo. And thanks, and whoever published her obituary, I was able to track her down. So they do very well. That's how you track your history and your research for any kind of ancestry, to look for names and things. Obituaries are the place to go. Even though they're sad, there's a lot of good information in there because you're looking for next of kin or maiden names. That's where I got her name. So Audrey Gray Remo. William H. Reynolds. He is on the Wall of Fame. He was a state senator at age 24. He was from Borough Park, Brooklyn. He was the builder of Coney Island's Dreamland. It was a $3.5 million amusement park. He's the gentleman who formed the States of Long Beach in 1907. He was the person who was the developer and builder of Long Beach, from our tiled roof homes to the boardwalk built by the Roger and Alice the Elephants. And we all know that they really didn't build the boardwalk, but it was a great come on. And finally, Long Beach City became established in 1922. What's nice about this picture on the right, they are on the boardwalk, and this is probably in 1908, it says January. His gentleman who was walking with him is the president, Theodore Roosevelt, Colonel A.E. Dick. He was the actual manager of the Long Beach Hotel because he had purchased the Long Beach Hotel in 1907. And Thomas Barr and Jacob Klipstein. These are the people that he had on board with him to promote Long Beach. Senator Reynolds. Rick Rubin is his name. And very recently, he just released, and I haven't seen it yet, so I have to get out there and look at it. He just did a recording of music with Paul McCartney. I actually went to school with Mr. Rubin. He doesn't remember me, of course, but we were in the same class of Long Beach High School, 1983. We were both in the same high school show. We did Guys and Dolls together. And in the bottom right, that punk band was called The Pricks. I had a copy of his, that's from the shirt from the cast party from Guys and Dolls, 1982. And that was his band. So I had a shirt from his band. So I donated my little copy of my shirt. He was nominated for Best Rock Albums, and he's still going strong in the music world. He is the co-founder of Def Jam Recordings. He took care of Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Public Enemy. He was like one of the finding the best talents, and former president and co-president of Columbia Records. So Mr. Rubin, you see on his yearbook picture, he says, "I want to play loud. I want to be heard. I want you all to know I'm not the one of the herd." And he has RR, Rick Rubin. Very handsome young fella. Edgar J. Sherrick, he was Long Beach High School's class 1941. He created the television program ABC Wild World of Sports. I remember that. He was a World War II Army meteorologist. He was a Harvard grad, and he worked in advertising. So his outstanding is all his miniseries and all his dramas and his specials. He's known for all his TV work. As again, hard to like fit it all on this screen. One of my favorites, of course, is The Stepford Wives. And I also like, which is the other one? I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. Mrs. Cunyo. Now this person, I have to tell you, I remember her so well. I had her for 9th grade English. She graduated Long Beach High School in 1941, and doing this research for this program, going to the high school and looking at all the Wall of Fame plaques, I was wondering, why is Mrs. Cunyo up here? And I said, yo, she's a great, great teacher. But it was beyond being a great teacher when I read why, because when they originally created the Wall of Fame, it was for athletics. So she was a pioneer for women's athletics. She was the first woman lifeguard in Long Beach. She was president of the senior class. She did many, many things while she was a student at Long Beach High School, and she taught ninth grade. She taught ninth grade English. I remember reading Romeo and Juliet with her. I remember doing all these wonderful things. And then I looked at her name and I'm like, Josephine Valente Cunyo. Valente, that sounds so familiar. And of course, I went to look some information about Mrs. Cunyo's, of course, her maiden name. And I found out something very special. In her obituary, it told me who she was. And the gentleman on the next screen is her father, Michael Valente. He was a World War I veteran, and he actually received the Medal of Honor, and it was granted to him by Herbert Hoover. He was in a regiment that rescued a whole regiment from disaster in France, Company D, 107th Regiment, 27th Infantry. And he lived in Long Beach. He was a builder and a real estate agent. He was a Long Beach City Marshal. And as of in 2011, they renamed the Long Beach Bridge in his honor. So Michael Valente was Mrs. Cunyo's dad. So in doing this project, I found out something very, very nice about Mrs. Cunyo, and I really loved her. Thank you for your service, Mr. Valente. This gentleman I also had in high school, 10th grade social studies, but he's up here also because he was actually the coach for the 2007 varsity girls softball team, and they won state championships. He was a Long Beach high school teacher from 1980 to 2014. As being their coach, he won 450 games. Mr. Verdi, thank you. I really appreciated you when you were in school. I had him for social studies in 10th. Mr. Harvey Wiesenberg. Again, here's a gentleman who has so much that I have learned about him this past year because I recorded his oral history at the Long Beach Library. Long Beach High School graduate, 1952. As you could see on the top left, he was on the track team. He was a lifeguard here. He worked in the recreation center. He was a Long Beach police officer. He was a city councilman. And finally, of course, we all know him as a champion for people with special needs. He's a New York State Assemblyman, retired. He has given over 60 years of his life to public service. And he recently published a book, For the Love of a Child, about his son, Ricky, who's a special needs child, who's now 62. And he very much believes in taking care of us and our people. And those with special needs are very close to his heart. I love his poster, Read. Of course, it's at the Long Beach Public Library. And I see Mr. Wiesenberg weekly. And in doing this program with him, with his oral history, I've learned so much about him and why he did what he did. And he did it because he loves the people.
Yay, Harvey.
Yay. Woody Allen. You'd never think Woody Allen lived in Long Beach, right? So one day I get a question, one of my reference questions. And my reference question is, did Woody Allen live in Long Beach? And I'm like, I don't know, let's go find out. So I took a look into some research, and I did find an article in the New York Times that led me back to the Independent. Why it came up is because he was filming at the Promenade, which was the Promenade Hotel, but originally was the Hotel Nassau on National Boulevard and the Boardwalk. It's now a condominium. It's one of the oldest hotels left in Long Beach. Was built in, I think it opened in 1910. So he was born in Brooklyn, but he lived in Long Beach for 4 years. It's not a very long time, but it's funny because they quote him in the New York Times article that someone actually came back to me to find out more about it. And I did find it in the Independent, and it's on the screen, the Independent Voice. And he quotes himself, I quoted him. He says, I remember going to school barefoot and walking on the beach. Wow. So he was filming at that time in 82 when it came out in the Times, and this person wanted to know if that's true. And of course it is. Woody Allen Comes Home. And it's a whole article about the filming of his upcoming project, which in the newspaper, they do not tell you the name of the film that he was doing, but the name of the film was A Midsummer's Night's Sex Comedy. And that was filmed at the Hotel Nassau, parts of it, not the whole thing. So Woody Allen came home for a very short stint doing a movie, and they quoted him. So that's how I got the reference question to follow up that really, did he really live here? And of course he did for a little bit.
Do you know where he lived? Where in Long Beach?
He lived in the West End, and he also lived in the middle of town. That's why he was at 2 different elementary schools. Because at some point in the West End, he went to West School. And then at some point when he lived another time, it didn't give his address. He lived in the center of town, so he went to Central, which is down by the condo right now in front of, by the library, the condominium. That used to be Central School.
Wow. Wow.
Mr. Charles Atlas, he was a bodybuilding mecca. Now, how he got his fame, of course, he was called the 97-pound weakling. This gentleman comes from an Italian background, foreign, and did so well for himself because he built upon him being this very tiny, underdeveloped young man, and he turned himself into this dynamo, as you could see. Oh my goodness, you see his ad. And he sold this dynamic tension, which is kind of an exercise program method that he did to develop his muscles and his training for himself. And he won, of course, a Madison Square Garden in 1922. He won a contest, the most perfectly developed man. And they actually modeled this sculpture that you see in 1924, The Dawn of Glory, is after him. And it's actually it's in Highland Park in Brooklyn. So very, 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 very nice looking man, and went after his goal, and he did it. He lived in Point Lookout. And actually, if you're riding through Long Beach, you'll see, going to the West End, you'll see a sign that says Charles Atlas. He's got a sign, so his family put a sign there for him in his memory. This gentleman, Charles Abnett, he was the largest North American distributor of electronics back in the 1930s. He did, during the war, he was selling radio parts to the government, and he had defense contracts. His son, of course, after he became of age and went into business with his father, they expanded. It became Bendix Aviation Corporation, and they had a contract with them. They actually developed 3 major electronics distributors in the nation by the 1960s. He was on the Long Beach Memorial Hospital Board of Trustees. And at this time, he was doing so much with something so very, what we consider very minute, these little tiny parts, but it made him very successful. And he's a Long Beach person. This gentleman, Long Beach High School graduate in 1929, he won the Tom Hogan Cup in 1929. He was on the patrol for lifeguard at age 16. And he broke the age barrier to be a lifeguard in the city of Long Beach because you had to be 21. So when he argued with them and he fought with them, they actually did change the rules, and he won many, many, and I say many, many swimming contests. And he was actually, like, he was on the World Wall of Fame for wrestling. You could see he has got a Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame museum in 2005. He's the WWE Hall of Fame 2021. He was in World War II. He got a Silver and Bronze Star medal and citation and Purple Heart. I have a picture of Mr. Bosch on the top on the left. Long Beach Patrol, he won many, many, many awards, and he was a wrestler. Mr. Bosch, I had a lot of scanning, and I found many pictures of him doing Long Beach Patrol in his lifetime here. So he made a way for children, young people, teenagers who are walking our beaches today. It's because of what he did to promote being a lifeguard at a young age. John Michael Bolger, he was born in the Bronx and he was raised in Long Beach. He's most known for his movies Twins, Carlito's Way, and War of the Worlds. He mostly portrayed a lot of police officers in different series: NYPD Blue, Law and Order Special Victims Unit, Law and Order Criminal Intent, and Blind Justice. What I found very funny in the movie Delirious, which I had to use this little snippet from the bottom, he plays Len. So very good actor. Let's see, Jim Bowden, he passed away in 2019. He was the famous New York Yankees pitcher. He was very well known for his fastball. His career was supposed to be made bigger in the publishing of this book. He published a book in 1970 called Bowl 4. And basically it was an expose on baseball and telling about the dark side of some of the players, including himself, of course. And the publishing of the book made him an outcast. They did not like the book. They said it was controversial, but it sold millions of copies. It was sold out at the stand. You couldn't buy it. He worked for ABC and CBS Sports News. Down in 1998, he did get invited back to Old Timers Day at Yankee Stadium. And the cheers were amazing for him being invited back after 30 years, because they blackballed him for the book because of what he said. He republished the book in 2000, and New York Public Library said this should be the book of the century. And Time magazine said it should be, and it is, on the 100 greatest nonfiction books ever written. Clara Bow. Now, all of my life, I live in the canals, and this house is a beautiful house. They just raised it, actually, but this is an old photo of the house. It looks like an Arabian Night home. It has the arches and the dome at the top, and when you come to the bridge, you see the beautiful house. They always said Clara Bow lived there, Clara Bow lived there, Clara Bow lived there, and I've been researching this for a very long time. I did come across this book. It was written by the city along with the architect, and Bill Hemp is the artist. He's the one who sketched all the sketches in the book. And I could not find not one, and I say not 1 ounce, that she ever lived here. Everything pulls out that she lived out in California. And but it was so interesting how rumors start that someone lived here. She was a film star in the 20s. In 29, she made a film called Wings. That was actually an Academy Award winning Best Picture. She lived and grew up in Brooklyn when she was a young person, but it never said she ever lived here. So is that myth or fact? But I love that house. And actually, if you come by the house today and you look at it, the people renovated it after Sandy. They did a magnificent job. They did a great job. This is another person whom I couldn't trace the house because the house was torn down in the 80s. This is an actual drawing of the house. This is 340 West Bay Drive. And we are talking about Miss Burke. This is the lady of the Ziegfeld Follies, and most well known for playing Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz. She was an amazing, amazing actress. She had an amazing career. I couldn't even begin to put her films on here because it just would not fit. And I wanted to put whom, of course, she was married to, who Mr. Ziegfeld, who started the Ziegfeld Follies. Billy Burke and Mr. Ziegfeld were married in 1914, and he did pass away way before that she did, but she always stayed with him. I actually was flipping through her bio, and I was reading a lot about their private life, and she stayed with him. She married him. They stayed together. She had a very successful career. Again, Their family home and their estate is on Hastings on the Hudson, but I still could not prove, even though everybody says the Flo Ziegfeld house is 340 West West Bay Drive. I could not find any proof to show that, but maybe one day, if I could ever find the original plans for the house, maybe there would be a transfer of ownership or something that they live there. So she may have been a summer resident at some point, but I couldn't find anything to document that.
Yes,
So
I heard
go
that
ahead.
I heard that she had lived down in that facing Reynolds Channel. Yes, I
Well,
heard
that's West Bay Drive.
Oh yeah.
So it is, that's the house. It's only a sketch of it because there is no longer, the house is gone. They knocked it down. But again, there's no more documentation. Once the house is destroyed, if you go to the county and you go to the address, there's not a house there that's this house anymore. So there was no way to me to say confidently that she actually lived there. But a lot of stars used to come here and stay for a while and then they'd leave. So very well have been, a summer home, but I couldn't find any documentation. But I still love her.
They should rename it Glendora Way in her honor.
Oh, yeah, okay. This is another one, which is a great story. Of course, Senator Reynolds always tried to get the best to come to Long Beach to encourage other people to come to Long Beach. And the Nassau Hotel to the east of the Nassau Hotel on the boardwalk, there were tennis courts as part of the hotel. And there were, there was a bandstand there, which is the earlier parts of that time. And then he had this idea of building castles by the sea. So in around 1914 or so, he built castles by the sea on that property and invites, of course, Vernon and Irene Castle to be the promoters. They are the dancers who are very famous for their dancing in film. And they filmed in Castles by the Sea, the 1915 film Whirl of Life. And I had shown this in a film program that I did. And it's a very short clip of them doing the whirl that was filmed in Castles by the Sea. Now, this is old folklore to me. The Stellan House, which is 15 Jackson Boulevard, which is now Edwards Boulevard, no longer exists. Of course, the house was torn down, but it is on record on the census dating back from 1915 New York State Census all the way to 1930 that this house cost $60,000 to build. And on this postcard, this is the Stellan House. So they owned the home. It says it right on the census. They owned the home and it cost that much money to have it built. Everybody says that's the Vernon and Irene Castle house. Did they really stay there? Did they really live there? Who knows? But they came here for the summers. They performed here, and until the castles it did burn down in the 30s. So, but again, Reynolds got the best to bring people down here, and it's all history. It's all part of our history. They danced and dazzled the entire world. Cab Calloway III, he actually did live in the Lido Quads. And we've heard Joanna Belli talk about this in her Lido Club presentation, and she's written her book. He performed at the Lido and he was a resident in the quads. So in the quad houses, which are built off of Lido Boulevard and Blackheath Road. So he actually did live there and his family lived there. He had a 65-year career. I loved him in Stormy Weather. I love Porgy and Bess. I love Hello Dolly. I mean, you name it, I just love it. And in my son, recently, we just watched the Blues Brothers again, and I showed my son the Blues Brothers. So he was a great musician. I remember my mom talking about Minnie the Moocher. I mean, this is like way before my time, but I do know of him. And so Mr. Cab Calloway did live in Lido. and he performed a lot around Long Beach and at the hotels. Mr. William Kahn, he was a Nassau County District Attorney from 62 to 74. He served in World War II. He was an Army corporal. He, along with the DA, he took down big rings. He was into anti-drug programs. He was helping the troubled youth. Unfortunately, he did take a not good turn. He did had an indictment, and he did serve 5 months in prison. He was disbarred. But while the time he was actually working for us, he did amazing things. And he is was a Long Beach resident, and he was he served for our country. Unfortunate that, sometimes just people make mistakes, but he's on our list because he did become successful, and he did at first fight for us. William Kahn. Mr. Joe Carlino, he was Speaker of the Assembly for Nassau County. He was the Republican chairman from 45 to 64. He was Majority Leader for 4 years, from 55 to 59. Everything I've ever read about this man, the Democrats and Republicans, they loved him. I had almost every Democratic leader in the city of Long Beach loved Joe Carlino. This thing that happened with him, and I put it on the Life magazine cover because this article was very important to why he was brought up on charges and he had to go in front of the Assembly Committee on Ethics. It's because at that time, if I don't remember this back then, but I did a lot of research on it, when, what's the gentleman's name? I'm sorry, hold on, I lost my train of thought. They were back to build these shelters for the atomic weapons, and they actually passed a legislation for the investment into these for our defense and for nuclear weapons. And I think they were called shelters, fallout shelters. And he helped pass the bill that Rockefeller was supporting, and he supported the bill. And it might have been actually through Kennedy's time. And he lived also on East Bay Drive. Basically, the life issue, as you could see about the survival of the fallout, they really wanted to do this. The reason why he was brought up as an interest on charges is because even though he was on the board of Lancer Industries, they're the ones who make the fallout shelters. So there was a conflict of interest for him. So it did not look good for him because he was on their board, but he said he never had any clout to make any decisions, or he didn't get any monies from that. So there was no charges brought up against him, and he did not serve any time for this. This was dismissed. But in the Leader on October of 1960, it says Joe Carlino gains Democratic support. And in a Democratic town, he was a Republican chairman, and he did very well for himself at that time. Chuck Close, he just passed away, this gentleman. He was an artist. The portrait to your left was what made him famous, and his technique of the style of artistry. Now, I'm not very good with art, Louis, you are, but he basically was an artist, a painter, and a photographer. He basically painted Kate Moss, Lou Reed, Philip Glass, and he sold actually his Cindy Sherman portrait with his technique, sold for $1.2 million. He had a seizure, and it actually left him paralyzed. And with therapy, he did regain some upper body movement, but he couldn't walk very well. So he used the wheelchair, and he stayed painting. He stayed painting till almost to the end. He didn't move to Long Beach until about 2013. And in 2015, he was diagnosed with temporal dementia. And of course, he just passed away this past year. But you see artistry. I mean, Long Beach attracts celebrities throughout history, as you could see. So as my brother had said earlier, he could count, they said about 400. I don't think I've got 400, but there's a lot of people who just come to Long Beach for many reasons, for beauty, to be by the ocean, and just because it's a beautiful place to be.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah, no, he had a very interesting way to do the artwork. Alan Combs, he was political analyst on Hannity and Combs. He resided in Long Beach. You know, people have sent me lists of people who they said lived in Long Beach. Again, I couldn't find anything to say that he actually lived here. He probably could have, but a quote right from, you know, from a thorough source, his quote was, "I haven't been in Lumbrook for a while," which whereas I grew up, he said. And at the time he said, being back on Long Island really does feel like home. So he lived in the city and he came out to visit because he had family out here, but I couldn't find anything to prove that he actually lived here. Maybe he did. Myth or truth? This gentleman actually lived on Carrigan with his wife, Joseph, let's see if I can say his name right, Aaron Reich. He passed away a while ago in 73, but his contribution was that he actually made a deal with Nikon products, with the Nippon, the Japanese company for manufacturing lenses and cameras and opticals and scientific equipment. Actually, I have a Nikon sitting next to me. I just bought it not long ago. I love their cameras. He lived on Carrigan. His wife actually lived into her 90s. They were partners in this company, and this is his New York Times obituary that gives in very big detail how he made a contract with the Nikon people and how he brought that equipment to the United States.
And Carrigan is in the canals, isn't it?
Yes, Carrigan's in the canals, yes.
Right.
He would have been our neighbor. This gentleman just passed away this year. He's a young man. He was a hip hop recording artist, a producer. He was actually born in UK, but he came to live in Long Beach. And basically he launched his career here in the 80s. His brother and himself and a friend, they were rapping and they were doing their music. And they actually did release a big album, which made a real bang for this type of hip hop, which I'm not familiar with this type of music, but his stage persona, he said he created his persona by looking at comic books and cartoons and the sounds of his youth. And just recently, Donna Graydon from the city manager and the city of Long Beach and people in MLK and the people who live here decided to dedicate the street to him. So the street between Hudson and Long Beach Boulevard on Riverside is now KMD, MF Doom Way. So that's in his memory. He was a young man who died too young. Max Fletcher. This is going back now into the 20s and 30s. And of course, even me, and I'm not that old, I know Betty Boop. I know Popeye and Bruto and Plutus. And so he was a film director. And of course, his studios was Fletcher Cartoon Studios. And he was world famous for Coco the Clown, Betty Boop, and all his creations. He animated the Popeye series. They said he lived at 160 Lafayette Boulevard. That house still stands. The New York County records said the house was built in 25. And there's a picture here. This is a very early 20s, probably photograph of the house. It doesn't look exactly like this anymore, but you could still see the archways.
Wow.
But it's amazing because the way the records are in the Nassau County, there's no way for me to trace that he lived there, but or owned the house, but he could have lived there. So is it myth or fact? Not sure, but it's definitely a very one of Long Beach's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, Long Beach has a lot of stories about who lived here and who didn't, but I find this one very, very intriguing because I love this house. It's still there, and and I do like Betty Boop, and I love watch Popeye when I was a kid. So the animation for those were like those things I grew up with.
Yes, me too. And I
So
remember.
it's very interesting how they said he lived here. He
Yeah.
very well could have.
Yeah.
So myth or fact?
Wow.
Mike Francesca, he's still with us. He grew up in Long Beach on Michigan Street. He lived down in East Atlantic Beach, lived on Buffalo Avenue. And he told his story to the Long Beach Magazine that most of his childhood and the major part of his childhood was being at the beach. He played basketball at West School. He played at every playground around. He played baseball for school teams. And he gave a shout out to Bob Carroll, whom actually we lost, I think it was either a year or so ago, at the he was head of recreation. Even I remember Bob Carroll, he was great. He attended LBCS, which is Long Beach Catholic, which is still in the West End. He went to Maria Regina High School, which is now Kellenberg. He was a big sports person. He said sports kept him focused. He went to St. John's for communication and management, and basically had been offered a job with the world tennis team, and he turned it down. And of course, he starts out with CBS Inside Sports, and we all know him from WFAN radio with his solo career. And he did perform on radio with Mike and the Mad Dog with Chris Caruso on WFAN as well. So he had a great career, and I read the articles, many of them about Mr. Francesca. So he's a grown-up person from Long Beach. This young fella, do you remember him? He was on like every commercial on TV for this cereal box. I never ate the cereal, but I always asked my mother if we could buy it because I liked the commercial. John Gilchrist, he grew up on Wisconsin Street. In 1971, he was 3.5 years old when he made this commercial. And his two brothers are in the commercial as well. And he's quoted as saying, "It felt like I was just sitting at the kitchen table with my family," because they shot the commercial with him and his two brothers having cereal breakfast at the table. He didn't say a word in this commercial. He was only a little baby boy. He was 3.5 years old. But everybody knows that Mikey liked Life cereal. They aired this commercial in the early 70s. I remember it well. Today, he works at Madison Square Garden, and he's director of media sales. So yes, Life cereal, this is the guy. This is that little guy there with the cute cheeks. He was adorable. Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet. This couple was very, very famous. They met on the Tonight Show in the 50s. They got married in 57. There's not enough room on the screen to tell you all the pieces that they recorded together and all the shows that they were on. I mean, I remember them on TV growing up, and I love music, so you know. The top photograph actually is them sitting on our beach. And this was from a young lady. She took this photograph of them, and it's around 73, 74. So I just put 73 ? They did live in several houses in Lido Beach, but the one that they're most known for is the one on the Lido Dunes on 80 Saratoga Street. That house was sold in the 80s, not sure of the date. He was quoted as saying, "It was a beautiful house. You walked over the dunes to the ocean," and that was from Newsday, November 3rd, 2009. So they spent their whole lives singing and performing together, and they're from Lido. Rocky Graziano, he's a neighbor, because everybody says he lived on Curly Street, but I couldn't tell you which house because no one could tell me exactly which house it was. But everybody I spoke to, Graziano lived on Curly Street, which is also in the canals. He had a great pro career, 67 to 16. He had 52 knockouts. He performed, all his life he was boxing, and he fought Sugar Ray Robinson. He had a knockout in the 3rd round in 1952. So his boxing record was amazing, and he lived in Long Beach. If anybody knows which house he lived in, let me know. This gentleman, Smith Hart, was born in Long Beach, and then he did kind of move away, but he was a Canadian American Wrestling Hall of Famer at the WWE. He wrestled all his life, and so he was born here, so he had Long Beach in his blood, but of course he moved on to wrestling, and he stayed in Canada, but he was in WrestleMania, and he wrestled most of his life, and he was training too as well. Eleanor Holm, she swam here in the 20s. She swam at the Lido, and when it was the Lido Hotel. She swam at the Olympia pool. Her family's summer home was at 69 Pennsylvania. She was in the Olympics doing the 100-meter backstroke and the 28, and the 32 Olympics in Los Angeles. She won gold for the 100-meter backstroke. And she was an amazing swimmer. At the left bottom, you'll see her sitting with Johnny Weissmuller, and I think it's her trainer. And at the bottom right, you'll see the Olympia pool, which was on the boardwalk and the beach, up on the beach. So that's a great shot. Thank you, courtesy of Chuck Jacoby, for that. The Olympia pool was very, 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 very well-known pool. Many, many famous people swam at the Olympia pool. Johnny Weissmuller, Buster Crabbe, Miss Holm, and the other gentleman, we're going to see a slide on him, Harold Stubby Kruger. Robert Ruby Goldstein lived on California Street. He was a lightweight from 25 to 37, and he was a very, very well-known referee. One of the fights that he's famous, of course, is the young man. He didn't stop the fight in time, and I think he died. It was Kid Parrott versus Emil Griffith at the Garden. So the gentleman, that last round, that 12th round, was not good, and he retired right after that. He didn't stay doing boxing after that, but he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1994, and the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and the World Boxing Hall of Fame. So I think we're about done for today. We're already at 3 o'clock, probably a little after. So we're going to have to do part 3 because I'm only up to G.